Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm here to talk to you about how to be a mindful leader of yourself and others. So I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing a lot of hype about mindfulness. Is that right? Okay. So Harvard Business Review writes a lot about mindfulness. And the reason that they do that is because they believe that in order to be an effective leader, you have to be mindful, because mindfulness can help with self-regulating, making better decisions, and reducing stress. So the other benefits that science has shown is that it changes the brain, again, helping you to make better decisions, self-regulate, and focus. It also helps to improve well-being. It helps to improve physical health and mental health as well. So just out of curiosity, how many people here have a mindfulness practice? Okay. No, that's okay. And how many people meditate? Wow. Okay. All right. So I'm preaching to the choir here. You all know the benefits of it, which is great. So basically, as most of you know, mindfulness is just accepting the present moment as it is, without labeling it, without judging it as good or bad, right or wrong. And the reason this is important is because it helps our ability to be able to be, number one, present, number two, to actually be joyful without judging it. And it also breaks the loop of thinking. So I want us to do a short practice, short mindfulness practice. And if you already have a practice, you can consider this a mindful pause. And if you don't have a practice, you can just see how it feels for you. So I want you to take a minute to just bring your attention into the room. Okay. And now take a moment to listen for the farthest sound that you can hear. Okay. Did that bring you into the present moment? Just raise your hand if it did. Okay. So that's something you could do anytime throughout your day, just if you want to stop that constant loop of thinking, because we're always either thinking of the future or thinking of the past, and it really, literally wears us out. So that's something you can do at any time, anywhere, listening for sound. So just a little bit about me. Similar to Regine, I've had lots of transitions. I was a zookeeper, and after being a zookeeper, 9 months after I left, I became a news reporter. And then after being a reporter, I worked in Mayor Michael Bloomberg's administration as a press secretary. And then I went into corporate PR because I wanted to make some more money, and I was tired of waking up at 4 a.m. to check the posts for bad headlines about the mayor. So corporate PR came with its own stresses, and that's actually what led me to meditation. So a few years ago, would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic. I would have panic attacks. And I had so much anxiety during the day that I was just tired, couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate, and it was wearing me out. So I started dabbling with different forms of meditation, and I came across transcendental meditation, which has been scientifically proven to reduce anxiety. So I do that 20 minutes twice a day. And then I became a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. So I teach meditation to organizations, groups. I also work one-on-one with people, incorporating mindfulness, career coaching, presentation training. So now I'm a coach. So this is probably, I think, my 4th career. It is. And I just believe in following my curiosity. So once I get kind of tired or done with one thing, I'm like, okay, what's next? And as Regine said, really, if transitions may not be easy, but if the answer isn't hell yes, or if you just feel like I'm not happy doing this, it is worth considering what you want to do next. So we're here to talk about being present in mind and body. And the reason why that's important is because, as I mentioned, It really impacts your ability to be happy. It impacts your ability to focus. And how many people here are involved in product design? Anybody? Okay, one person, yeah. So it helps in terms of clarity and focus. And that's actually why we're here to talk, what we're here to talk about, because we have as many as 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And that boils down to about 2,000 thoughts per hour and more than 34 a minute. So we are doing a lot of thinking. And that is wearing us out. And if that thinking is negative, it's taking a toll on our health as well. On our health, it can depress our immune system, increase the likelihood of depression, and of course, cause stress. So we're here to talk about being mindful because as a leader, being mindful really just means working with people, doing work with focus, clarity, creativity, and compassion in the service of others. So we're going to talk first about being a mindful leader, and then I'll go into talking about being a mindful you. And 3 components to being a mindful leader include mindful listening, empathy, and compassion at work. So mindful listening. So this is really just being present with the person who's in front of you. And the reason why that's important is because if you're present, you're able to deal with who or what is in front of you skillfully, right? And it also means being aware of what's going on internally, whether that's judgment, whether that's nervousness, whether that's anger, and really just trying to be in the moment. And the benefit of that is that, number one, it helps you to retain information. Number 2, it causes you to pause before you speak so that maybe you might consider the effect of your words before you say it. I, for one, have definitely said things I regret in the heat of the moment, so this can help decrease the likelihood of that. And it also will help you to pay attention for longer. And for the other person, I think we've all had the experience of talking to someone where we know they're not really listening. And when you get the sense that the person is really listening, you feel that the person is there for you. And it doesn't mean that you agree with them. It just means that you're open to hearing a different perspective. So next is empathy. So empathy is important because it's just about putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And again, it's just a way to understand the person's perspective. It doesn't mean that you agree with them, but it just means you recognize we all see the world through different lenses. So if you have rosy lenses or you wear rosy glasses, you see the world as rosy. If you wear blue glasses, you see the world as blue. So this is just recognizing we all have different perspectives, but it's important to practice empathy because that's just recognizing that and not putting the person down for that. So when you're able to bring empathy to the situation, the other person can feel it. And when they can feel it, you're likely to get a better response and better behavior. And I don't know if anybody has children in their life, but you might have experienced that with kids. When you're kind of not present, or if you're like being really judgmental, they sense it. But if you're kind of open to feeling and seeing how they feel, they usually can calm down a bit. So also compassion at work. So compassion takes empathy up a notch, and that compassion is really noticing how a person feels and trying to alleviate their suffering. So with compassion, the question is, how can I help you? And I think when we've been recipients of compassion, that really makes all the difference. So if you notice somebody is suffering, really being open to, how can I help you? And that is the idea behind compassionate product design too, because it's about creating something that helps to alleviate people's suffering. And this is a quote from the co-founder of Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, which brought mindfulness to Google as well. And mindfulness is being brought to lots of medical organizations and companies for their staff and for patients because of the benefits. And today, actually, I read an article that Richard Branson is bringing mindfulness on board Virgin Australia for people who are afraid to fly, and also for its staff. So he's not the first, he won't be the last, but there are lots of benefits to being able to practice and learn mindfulness. So let's talk about being a mindful you. So before you can be a mindful leader of others, you have to start with yourself. So being a mindful you means taming the inner critic, practicing self-compassion, and practicing mindfulness, which a lot of you seem to do. So first, let's talk about taming the inner critic. So do you beat yourself up? There are people in here who beat yourselves up? Well, if you do because you think it's what you're supposed to do to help you keep on edge or to keep you productive, research actually shows that doesn't happen. It's actually counterproductive. So by beating yourself up, negative self-talk, you're depressing your immune system, again, increasing the likelihood of depression, and also causing yourself a lot of stress. And also, when you're wallowing in negativity, you also stay problem-focused versus solution-oriented. So the antidote to negative thinking is to incorporate some positive self-talk, and that really means kind of just talking to yourself as you would a good friend. So these are just some examples. This is from the Mayo Clinic, if you can see it. So for example, let's say you're presented with a new task or a project, and you say to yourself, I've never done it before. Well, you could counter that thought with, it's an opportunity to learn something new. And for example, or I don't have the resources, you can say necessity is the mother of invention, which I think Regine talked about too in terms of her career changes. So secondly, in terms of practicing compassion, Buddhist psychology believes before we can genuinely have compassion for others, we have to have it for ourselves. So compassion is really about responding to your suffering in a kind and supportive way. Also think about how you might talk to a friend. And really to just take an effort to stop putting yourself down. So the idea here is when you notice you're not being kind to yourself, you just notice it, bring a mindful approach to it, you don't suppress it, and you don't beat yourself up for not having it. And you really just try to bring yourself some loving and kind attention. And it's also about giving yourself permission to not be perfect. No one is perfect. And so when we're able to embrace ourselves with kindness and care and speak gently and kindly to ourselves, it can be very soothing, and it can help to break that kind of lack of compassion for ourselves. And again, if we're able to cultivate it for ourselves, then we're able to cultivate it more for others. So lastly, consider a mindfulness practice for those of you who don't. I know you said here and there. And really, these days, you all know, you can find it pretty much everywhere. There are free apps out there, Insight Timer, Headspace Calm, YouTube. If you want to learn in person, there are tons of classes here in New York City, free classes actually, lunchtime, evening. A simple Google search will bring it all up. And if you're not ready to do a formal mindfulness meditation practice, you don't have to sit. There are actually ways to incorporate it into your everyday. So for example, we listened for sound. That's one way. And I want to try one more exercise with you guys about bringing in mindfulness. So we're going to notice 3 things you see, hear, and feel. And I'll guide you through it. So take a moment to notice 3 things you see. And that could be the screen, the curtain, the color of a shirt that someone next to you is wearing. So take a moment to notice 3 things you see. Okay. Now we're going to notice 3 things you hear. So that could be me speaking, that could be some electrical device on, that could be the rustling of clothing. So take a moment to notice 3 things you hear. Okay. Now we're going to move on to noticing 3 things we feel. And that could be sitting on a chair, our feet on the ground, our clothing against our skin. So notice 3 things you feel. Okay, thank you. Thanks for taking time out to do that. So by taking those moments throughout your day to do that, really, for example, noticing 3 things you could do at any time. On your commute, rushing to work, on the subway, in the office, anytime you want to just pause that loop of thinking of always being in the future or always being in the past. And even before you start a project, it's a quick exercise just to kind of bring you into the moment to hopefully help you have better focus, clarity, and better be able to concentrate. So just things you can incorporate into your everyday. So just to wrap up, we talked about being a mindful leader of others, and that means mindful listening and non-judgment. That means practicing empathy, and that also means having compassion for others, but first really seeking to have it for yourself first. And one way you can do that is by taming the inner critic, and of course, practicing mindfulness, whether formally or just daily 1-minute, 2-minute exercises, listening for sounds, even listening to your breath, or noticing things that you see, hear, and feel. So the reason why all of this is important is because by being able to bring yourself into the present moment, like I said, you're better able to skillfully deal with who or what is in front of you. You're also increasing the capacity to actually be happy, and non-judgment just really is a good way to kind of travel through life, because we're not always going to like everything, and labeling things good or bad, right or wrong, really is just not always helpful. So please stay in touch. I have a couple of guided meditations. I have a 5-minute mindfulness meditation and a 7-minute loving kindness meditation to help with compassion on my website, or you can email me. I'd be happy to send those to you. Also have some articles, and if you want further research on anything I talked about today, please email me, and I will be happy to send you any information you'd like. So thank you. Yes, yes.
Yes. Rio has one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's such an important topic for us all to hear today. And I have a wonderful practice that centers me, allows me to focus. And the thing I would just like to add that I have found really, really, really helpful is that people think yoga is like, okay, I'm not going to offend, I might offend somebody. They have a stereotype of what yoga people look like, and you don't have to be that. And I've noticed just 10 minutes of yoga before meditation makes my meditation so much deeper and better. And we're all sitting so much that that's really what I have found to be just that combination of biohacking with mental. So it's just, I really appreciate your message, and I just wanted to put that out there. And anybody that would like to do a little meditation yoga thing, come see me. I'm always down for that.
Thank you so much. And that's a great point. And that is exactly also an example of really finding what works for you. Like, it's not about, I have to do 5 minutes of listening to my breath. Like, it really is about finding what works for you. Some people can kind of do the mindfulness for longer. Some people just want to do it for 1 minute before they head out the door. So it's not about feeling like, I can't meditate, just because you don't enjoy any of the things that are out there. Really, you can do and find what works best for you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. When I was young, my mom taught me meditation at a very young age. And what she used to teach me is like getting up at 5 o'clock and training your mind, like what will you be doing throughout the day. And that helps a lot because you know what you have to do and you stay focused on it. And she always told me, like, you always have an option either to choose that way or that way. So if you want to say, like, somebody said something to me, so I have an option either to consider it or to reject it. If it's going to help me for my future, definitely I'll consider it. Otherwise, I'll reject it. And it has helped me a lot because you can bifurcate what is positive, what is negative, what is needed, what is not needed. That's all I wanted to add to it.
Yes, thank you for adding that. Yeah, so your mom recognized the importance of setting an intention for your day.
And she's changed completely because before she used to shout and scream a lot, and now she's like, oh, I'll save my energy. Why should I waste it? You're gonna do it anyway. I'll be wasting a lot of energy. So she's now do whatever you have to, and we calm it down totally.
Thank you. But I like that idea of choosing like which perspective is really best for you, because it is about responding versus reacting. So if we're able to respond skillfully to something versus like just reacting, it is helpful for us and the other person.
My question, I share your interest in mindfulness, and I've been practicing yoga for about 10 years. But in all of that time, I've never once gotten to practice at home, gotten myself to practice. I've always had to go to an external class. I was wondering how you maintain your motivation and like self-discipline to do it by yourself twice a day.
Yeah. I think it just kind of boils down also to developing a habit. Like it's just become a habit. It's just the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. But I think most importantly, I just feel the benefits of it. Like I feel the difference when I don't meditate, and I feel the difference when I do meditate. So I just simply like the effect. So that's what keeps me going. Right, yeah. That's a great suggestion, too. Thank you.
I just have a question regarding the mindfully talking to someone. I'm kind of one to just blurt out the first thing that's on my mind, and whether it's appropriate for the situation or not, sometimes then I'm like thinking about it later, which then I have to use mindfulness to kind of be like, well, it's happened, like leave it. But I've always struggled thinking, okay, well, like, what am I gonna say? And how would you best approach that, whether it's in a confrontation situation or just a situation where you're like, oh wait, this, like, I can't talk about that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's not professional or it's not appropriate.
Yeah. And what you mentioned is normal. We all do it, right? Like that's our first inclination is when somebody says something to really kind of just blurt out what is on our minds. If it's a difficult situation or a situation that there's potential conflict, it's helpful if you can prepare yourself, if you know in advance it's going to happen. So if you can, you just kind of take a couple of breaths and really say to yourself, I'm going to come into this with as little judgment as possible, and I'm going to be open to hearing what this other person says. I don't have to agree, but I'm also going to share what I have to say. And if I find myself getting heated, if I find I'm getting angry, I'm just going to take a pause. And if I need to, I will exit. I'll say, let's come back to this at another time. But then there's a situation where you're not prepared for it. You don't know what's going to happen. So really, it's a practice more than anything. I used to be really reactive, like even on the subway, like somebody, like saying something, but now I'm just like, it's a practice. Let it go. It's nothing personal. It happens. We're in a city of 8-10 million people. Just let it go. So it just takes practice, if that's helpful. Thank you. Thanks.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, by the way, for an amazing talk.
Thank you.
What I wanted to say actually was just a point that was, do we have like two people? No? Okay. Something that the woman there said, be careful like whose advice you take to, like, who like, which advice you are like taking seriously, because like, I think in our effort to be diplomatic, we like are like nice and want to like take everyone's advice and like listen to what everybody has to say about us or And so just be very picky about people whose advice you're willing to listen to, and like what advice you're going to take. So like think critically about that, because I think it makes a really big difference. And so when you and the same goes for like whose opinions like people whose opinions you care about, you know, because if you care about everybody's opinion, you're like not going to go anywhere. And so be very picky about whose opinion you care about. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. And really, you all have your own meter. You know, if you hear something and something about it doesn't feel right, as you said, you can simply reject it and make another choice. And that's a great point, right? Like, you are your own highest wisdom. So it is about just kind of being mindful, being aware of it, and then choosing how you want to respond.
You know yourself better than others.
Exactly.
So I just have a couple things. When I was first learning meditation, I was very intimidated by it because I had this idea in my head about what it was supposed to be, and that whole like, oh, clear your mind, like the movies and TV shows I'll say, and recognizing after I started practicing more regularly that that's not what it's about, and I just think acknowledging that really helped me. And then bouncing off the earlier topic about creating a space, I've actually used technology at home to create that space. That's actually the same space that I use for like entertainment and whatnot, but just changing the environment of that exact same space changes my mindset for when I start meditating. So I actually use my Google Home and my Hue lights, and I have a meditation setting on them, and I tell Google that it's time to meditate, and my lights go into that mode. And then I tell it to talk to Headspace, and then we just do it, and it works really well, and that just puts me right in the right mode. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a great idea, and I love the point that you raised. So we all have these kind of preconceptions about what meditation is supposed to be. So it isn't about clearing your mind, because the mind was created to think. So it's not about getting rid of thoughts. What it is about is being aware of our thoughts and seeing if we can bring some non-judgment to our thoughts, right? And seeing when we're caught up in a story, and just seeing if we could pause that story, because all of that just physiologically has an effect on our body, on our brain, and again, it just helps us to be able to think more clearly, to have better clarity, to be creative, to be able to concentrate. So it just has a lot of benefits when we can stop that loop and stop that judging if we can. So yeah, it's not about clearing your mind. Thank you.
As a person who's getting into meditation, I had this question that I only meditate when I feel stressed. I don't do it on a regular basis. If I'm not stressed for months, I would not. So for me, meditation, it might be a misconception that it is somehow related to, if I am feeling stressed, I need to meditate. It's like a solution to a problem. But most of the people do it every day. I don't know how to develop that habit, and how does that help?
Yes, so it's great that you use it when you're stressed. I mean, it's similar to, there's also a compassion practice called self-compassion break. It's just taking a minute or two to recognize that you're suffering, and you know, noticing it and bringing some kind of gentle attention to yourself. And you obviously only do that when you're in a moment of suffering. So it's great that you use it to reduce stress. So, but the thing is, it can be kind of, how would you say, a proactive measure, because by meditating every day, you're actually lowering the kind of thresholds for stress for you. It doesn't mean you're not going to have stress, but it just means it kind of can give you a baseline. So, I mean, really, it just depends on how you do it when you are stressed. Like, you can think about, maybe I can do that every day for whatever amount of time is good for you, or maybe you do it during your commute if you're on the subway, or, you know, it's just about incorporating it fairly effortlessly into your day, just as you do it when you're stressed. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions? We have one.
Oh.
Okay.
All right, I was just gonna say back to the comment on like not reacting in situations. It's one of the things I like to do, is something you already brought up, is the active listening piece. And so I think of actively listening as you're sitting there and you're genuinely hearing what the person's having to say without formulating how you want to respond to them. So you have to kind of get out of your head a little bit, which is really difficult. But taking that, and then you can take a moment and a pause that you've just listened to them, and you say, okay, I need to take a moment to think about how I want to respond to that. And that gives you the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but not that fast. And so sometimes I'm like, count to 5. It's also the same thing for an extrovert who likes to talk all the time. So taking that little bit of time to respond how you want, because we say what we regret in the moment without taking, it could be 5 seconds. So just taking a little bit of time.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and to your point, a way that you can do that is, like you said, counting to yourself, or even just kind of going inside. So maybe you notice your breath, or maybe, you just try to maybe listen for sounds, because it just kind of breaks that judging of the person, or maybe getting reactive for a minute. And, it may not work the first time. It's just about practicing, because we all want to be mindfully listened to as well. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Tanya.
you.
Yeah.